Olivia never imagined that her father's 60th birthday would be the night she felt most alone in her entire life. She didn't miss the party because she forgot. She didn't miss it because something came up. She missed it because her own family decided she wasn't welcome. The invite came in a group message. Adults only, no drama, keep it clean. And just like that, Olivia, 34 years old, living alone in Charlotte, working hard, building her life from scratch, was being labeled as the problem. She tried calling her dad. He sounded distant, uncomfortable, like someone had already got to him first and told him what to say. On the night of the party, she told herself she wouldn't go. She made tea. She sat on her couch. She stared at the wall, but at 7 p.m., her hands drove her there anyway. She parked across the street. Lights off, engine running, just wanting one glimpse of her father blowing out his candles. That's when the security guard knocked on her window. And what he handed her next, nobody in that banquet hall was ready for. You know that feeling when a story grabs you and you just cannot put it down? That is exactly where we are right now. Before Olivia opens that envelope, go hit that subscribe button right now, because what is inside it is going to change this entire story. New videos drop every week, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Hit the bell, drop a comment, and tell me, have you ever been left out by your own family? Now let's get back to Olivia. That envelope is still in her hands, and she has no idea what she is about to read. My name is Olivia. I am 34 years old and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. From the outside, my life looks steady, a small apartment I am proud of, a job I worked hard for, a routine that keeps me grounded. But there is one part of my life that has never felt fully steady. My family, not all of it, just the part that came with Karen. My dad remarried when I was 19. I was old enough to understand it, but young enough to still hope it would work. It didn't. Not because I didn't try. I smiled at every dinner. I showed up to every holiday. But Karen always looked at me like I was a guest who had overstayed. And my dad, the man I loved most in this world, never seemed to notice. The message came on a Tuesday evening. A group chat with the details for Dad's 60th birthday party. Venue, dress code, RSVP deadline. I read it twice looking for something, just a small sign that I was expected there. It wasn't there. Everyone else had received a personal call or a separate message. I got the group text, same one sent to neighbors and old work friends. And buried in the middle of the details was one quiet line: adults only, please. Let's keep the evening relaxed and drama-free. I put my phone down on the kitchen counter and stood very still. Because I knew, the way you know things you have tried not to know for a very long time, that line was written for me. I called my dad that same night. He picked up on the third ring and his voice had that careful tone, the one he uses when he has already been told what to say. I asked him about the party. He said it was going to be a small thing. I asked if I was invited. There was a pause, just 2 seconds, but I felt it like a door closing softly in my face. He said Karen had handled all the planning and he hadn't really looked at the guest list. I hadn't looked at the list. For his own daughter, I kept my voice even. I told him I understood. I said I hoped he had a wonderful birthday. And when I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table in complete silence because some hurts are too specific to cry about right away. The next morning, my brother Jake sent me a text. 4 words, just let this go. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement that anything was wrong. Just 4 words that told me everything, that the family had already talked about me without me, that they had already decided what I should do, and that the expectation was for me to quietly disappear and make everything easier for everyone else. I stared at that message for a long time. I thought about all the times I had already let things go. This Christmas, I wasn't told about the venue change. On Thanksgiving, Karen filled my usual seat with her sister. The birthday calls from Dad that had gotten shorter every year. I had let all of it go, and it had only made the door close faster. The night of the party, I made a firm decision. I was not going. I changed into comfortable clothes, made a cup of tea, and sat on my couch telling myself this was fine. I did not need to be in that room to know my father loved me. I watched television. I washed the dishes. I went through every motion of a calm, normal evening. But at 6:45 p.m., I found myself standing at my front door with my keys already in my hand. I don't remember deciding to leave. I just remember locking the door behind me and getting into my car. I drove to the venue, a banquet hall across town with warm golden lights glowing through tall windows, music drifting out, laughter I could almost hear from the street. I parked across the road and turned off my headlights. I was not going in. I just needed to see it. I had been sitting there maybe 10 minutes when I saw him, a security guard crossing the parking lot, walking directly toward my car. My first instinct was to start the engine and leave, but something kept me completely still. He knocked on my window politely, not aggressively. I lowered the glass. He looked at me and said quietly, "Excuse me, are you Olivia?" My breath stopped. I nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small cream-colored envelope. slightly creased at the corner. My name was written on the front in handwriting I would recognize anywhere in the world. My dad's handwriting. The guard said, "A gentleman inside asked me to bring this out to you." Then he turned and walked back toward the entrance. And I sat there holding it, completely alone, heart pounding against my ribs. I held that envelope for a full minute before I opened it. I don't know what I was afraid of, maybe that it would be something small, something that explained nothing, something that would leave me feeling even more invisible than before. My fingers found the edge and I pulled it open carefully. Inside were two things: a folded handwritten note on plain white paper, and beneath it, a separate document, folded in thirds, printed and official looking. I opened the note first, Dad's handwriting. Uneven, a little rushed, like he had written it quickly, privately, maybe in a bathroom or a coat closet where no one could see him. I read the first line. Then I read it again, and just like that, the entire evening changed. Olivia unfolded the note slowly. The handwriting was her dad's, she would know it anywhere. But the words were not what she expected. It didn't say happy birthday wishes or a casual hello. It said, "Olivia, I didn't know you weren't on the list. I found out an hour ago when I asked Karen where you were. She said you declined. I knew that wasn't true. I am so sorry. Please don't leave. I need to see you tonight." She read it twice. Then a third time. Her dad had noticed. He had looked around that room full of people and felt her absence. That one small truth hit her harder than the exclusion ever had. She sat with that note pressed against her chest for a long moment. All those years of showing up and being looked past. All those holidays where she smiled through the discomfort. All those phone calls that ended just a little too quickly. And here, written in hurried, imperfect handwriting on a folded piece of plain white paper, was the thing she had needed to hear for a very long time. He noticed. He cared. He had not simply accepted her absence like everyone else had. Something shifted quietly inside her chest. Not completely healed, not even close. But just enough to keep her hands steady as she reached back into the envelope and pulled out the second document still folded neatly underneath. She unfolded it carefully. It was printed, official, formatted, with a header she recognized immediately. A legal document, her dad's name at the top, and then the words "Last Will and Testament Amendment." Her eyes moved down the page slowly. There was her name, Olivia Marie Henderson, listed clearly as a primary beneficiary. Except it wasn't listed anymore. Someone had gone through the document and her name had been removed, replaced. In its place sat a name she did not expect: Melissa Grant, Corinne's daughter from her first marriage. A woman Olivia had met maybe 4 times in her entire life. Olivia stared at the page. Her hands were not shaking. She was completely, dangerously still. Most people would have cried. Olivia understood that. This was the kind of moment that breaks something open in a person, being erased from your own father's will while sitting alone in a parking lot outside his birthday party. But Olivia didn't cry, not one tear. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and photographed every single page of that document. Front, back, every line, every signature, every date stamp. She zoomed in on the amendment date: 4 months ago, 4 months. Her dad had been standing next to her at Easter just 3 months ago, arm around her shoulders, telling her she was his girl. And somewhere in the background, a pen had already been moved across her name. She put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb slowly. No music, no phone calls, just silence and the quiet hum of the highway taking her back towards Charlotte. She wasn't angry, not in the loud, breaking way. It was something quieter and more focused than anger. She kept replaying small moments in her mind. Corinne's tight smile at Christmas. The way she always steered Dad away from one-on-one conversations with Olivia. The phone calls that had grown shorter every year. It hadn't been random. It hadn't been personality clashes or blended family awkwardness. It had been a plan. Slow, patient, invisible. And tonight, completely by accident, Olivia had just found the evidence. She called Dana the moment she got home. Her cousin picked up on the second ring. Dana always picked up, no matter the hour, no matter what was happening in her own life. Olivia didn't say hello. She just said, "I need to tell you something and I need you to just listen first." And Dana said, "Okay," just like that, no questions. So Olivia told her everything. The group message, the parking lot, the security guard, the note, the will amendment. She laid it all out in one long exhale while she sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet. When she finished, there was a short silence. Then Dana said very quietly, "Olivia, this has been going on longer than you know." Dana had noticed things that Olivia had been too close to see clearly. Small things at first, Corinne mentioning to relatives that Olivia was difficult to include or always stirring something up. Then bigger things. Family gatherings where Olivia's invitation was sent late or to the wrong address. Conversations where Corinne casually dropped that Olivia and her dad had a complicated relationship right now. Dana had assumed Olivia already knew. She had assumed there was context she was missing. But sitting on the phone that night, piecing it together out loud, they both realized the same thing at the same time. Karen had not been reacting to Olivia. Karen had been building a case against her, slowly, carefully, and completely out of sight, for at least 2 full years. The next morning, Olivia woke up early and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee that went cold before she touched it. She opened her email and started going back. Not just weeks, months, years. She searched her dad's name, Karen's name, family event names, and what she found was not dramatic, it was quiet. An invite that arrived 2 days after the RSVP deadline. A changed venue notification was sent to everyone except her. A holiday photo thread she had been silently removed from sometime in November. None of it screamed betrayal on its own. But lined up together, one after another, it looked exactly like what it was, a slow and deliberate erasure. She contacted an estate attorney that same afternoon. Not through a referral, not through family, she found someone completely separate, someone with no connection to anyone she knew. She sent the photographs of the will amendment through a secure email and asked for a consultation. The attorney called her back within 2 hours. His tone was measured but direct. He told her the amendment had been filed 4 months ago and that the process had moved unusually fast for a document of that complexity. He also noted that the signature, while legally valid, showed signs of being executed under what he called assisted conditions. He asked if her father had any cognitive concerns. Olivia paused, and for the first time, a new and much darker question entered her mind. Her dad called her 2 days later. His voice was warmer than it had been in months, lighter, like something had loosened in him since the night of the party. He apologized again for the invitation situation. He called it a miscommunication. Olivia listened carefully, hearing not just what he said but how he said it, the pauses, the careful word choices, the moments where he seemed to be reaching for something he couldn't quite say out loud. She did not mention the will. She did not mention the attorney. She asked him about his birthday dinner, laughed at the right moments, and kept her voice completely steady. When she hung up, she sat quietly and thought, not yet. The timing had to be right. That evening, Olivia went to a drugstore and bought a plain spiral notebook. Nothing special, just something solid and real. She sat at her kitchen table and began writing. Not venting, not processing emotions, documenting. Dates, times, specific events, exact words she remembered being said. She wrote about the Easter gathering 3 months ago where Karen interrupted every conversation she and her dad tried to have alone. She wrote about Thanksgiving 2 years back where her seat had been quietly moved to a different table. She wrote about the short phone calls, the missed invitations, the changed plans. Each entry was clear, factual, and specific. By the time she closed the notebook that night, it was 11 pages long. Dana called on a Sunday afternoon with something new. She had attended a small family gathering that weekend, cousins, aunts, the usual crowd, and Karen had been there with her usual warm smile and easy conversation. But Dana had been listening differently this time, carefully, and what she heard made her pull over on the drive home to call Olivia immediately. Karen had told 2 different relatives, casually, like it was old news, that Olivia had a jealousy problem and had been making things difficult for the family for years. One aunt had nodded like she had heard this before, which meant Karen had been saying it for a while, long enough that people had already accepted it as fact. While going through her phone that week, Olivia found an old voicemail she had never deleted, saved almost 3 years ago without fully knowing why. She pressed play. Her dad's voice filled the room, younger sounding somehow, easier, before the careful pauses and measured words. He had called her after a long work trip just to check in. And near the end of the message, completely unprompted, he said, "I just want you to know you have always been my rock. I don't say it enough, but you are." She listened to it once, then twice. Then a third time with her eyes closed. She didn't cry. She saved it to 2 different places on her phone. And she added the date to her notebook. By the end of that week, Olivia had a notebook, a folder of photographed documents, a recorded voicemail, an attorney on standby, and a cousin she trusted completely. She had more than enough to make noise. She could have called her brother. She could have sent the will photos to every family group chat. She could have shown up at her dad's house and laid everything on the kitchen table that same night. But she didn't, because she understood something that Karen had clearly never considered, that the most powerful move in a situation like this was not the loudest one. It was the most patient one. Olivia closed her notebook, made herself dinner, and waited. Olivia waited 10 days before she made her move, not impulsively, deliberately. She texted her dad on a Wednesday morning, keeping it simple and warm. "Hey Dad, I miss you. Can we grab lunch this weekend? Just the two of us like we used to." She held her breath after sending it. 3 minutes passed, then 5, then her phone buzzed. "I would really love that, sweetheart. Saturday work?" She exhaled slowly. He had responded fast, no checking with Karen first, no "let me see what we have going on." Just yes, immediate and certain. She typed back, "Saturday is perfect," and set her phone down. The first piece was in place. They met at a quiet diner on the east side of Charlotte, a place they used to go when Olivia was in high school before everything got complicated. Her dad was already there when she arrived, sitting in their old booth by the window, looking smaller somehow than she remembered. She hugged him and felt him hold on just a second longer than usual. They ordered coffee. They talked about small things first: her job, his garden, a book he had been reading. And then, in the middle of a comfortable silence, her dad put his coffee cup down and said, "Olivia, I owe you more than an apology for the other night." She looked at him steadily and said, "Tell me everything." Her dad talked for almost 20 minutes. He told her Karen had been saying for over a year that Olivia was resentful of their marriage, that she caused tension at family events, that she had made comments to relatives behind his back. He said he hadn't fully believed it, but he had let it shape things without realizing. His voice was heavy with something between guilt and confusion. When he finished, Olivia reached into her bag and placed her notebook on the table between them. Quietly, no drama, no raised voice. She slid it toward him and said, "I want you to read the first 15 pages." He looked at the notebook, then at her. Then he opened it. He read slowly. She watched his face move through confusion, recognition, and then something that looked like genuine shame. He stopped at the entry about Thanksgiving 2 years ago, the one where his seat had been moved. He said quietly, "I didn't know that was intentional." He kept reading. When he reached the final entry, Olivia reached back into her bag and placed the photographed will amendment on the table. She didn't say anything, she just let him look. He picked up the pages and studied them carefully. His face went completely still. He said, "I signed something." Karen said it was an insurance update. He looked up at Olivia slowly. "This isn't an insurance update." The diner was quiet around them. Her dad sat with the documents in his hands for a long moment, not speaking, just processing. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Olivia thought he might call Karen. She prepared herself for that, but he didn't call Karen. He pulled up his attorney's number, a man he had worked with for over 15 years, and pressed the call right there at the table. He said, "Robert, it's James. I need to come in this week. Alone. I have some questions about a document I signed a few months ago." He listened, nodded, and said, "Wednesday morning works perfectly." Then he put the phone down and looked at Olivia steadily. That same evening, Olivia was home making dinner when her phone rang. Karen's name on the screen. She stood at her stove for a moment, spatula in hand, and took one slow breath before answering. Karen's voice was bright and easy, the version she used when she wanted something to feel normal. She asked how Olivia was doing. She mentioned the birthday party, said she hoped there were no hard feelings about the invite situation, called it a planning oversight. She laughed lightly at one point. Olivia matched her tone perfectly, warm, unbothered, completely relaxed. She said all the right things. When the call ended, Karen almost certainly felt relieved. Olivia put her phone face down on the counter and smiled at the wall. Wednesday morning came, and her dad drove to his attorney's office alone for the first time in 3 years. Olivia knew this because Dana had quietly confirmed that Karen's usual routine was to drive him to every appointment: doctor visits, errands, legal meetings. She had positioned herself as essential to his daily life in ways that had become invisible through repetition. But this Wednesday, Karen thought he had a routine doctor checkup. He had told her that calmly the night before. He parked outside Robert's office, sat in his car for a moment, then walked in carrying Olivia's photographed documents in a plain manila folder. Nobody knew he was there. Nobody except Olivia. And she sat at her desk at work that morning, feeling the quiet electricity of a plan moving exactly as it should. Robert had been her dad's attorney for 15 years. He knew his handwriting, his communication style, his decision-making patterns. So when her dad sat across from him that Wednesday morning and laid out the photographed documents, Robert didn't look surprised. He looked concerned. He pulled up the original file on his computer and compared it carefully against the amendment. Then he told her dad something that made the room go very quiet. He said that when the amendment was filed, Karen had been present for every step of the process. She had provided the initial contact, scheduled the meeting, and sat in the room during the signing. Robert said carefully, "James, in 15 years you have never brought anyone with you to a legal meeting. Not once." Her dad sat with that information for a long moment. Robert didn't rush him. He just waited, the way good attorneys do when they know a client needs space to arrive at something on their own. Finally, her dad looked up and said, "I want to know what it takes to restore the original document." Robert nodded like he had been expecting that exact question. He walked him through the process, clear, straightforward, nothing complicated. Her dad asked how long it would take. Robert said he could have the paperwork ready within the week. Her dad said, "Do it." Just like that, 2 words, no hesitation. And somewhere in that quiet office on a Wednesday morning, Olivia's name moved back to exactly where it had always belonged. 9 days later, a bill arrived at the house. Standard looking, white envelope. printed address label, return address from a legal firm. Karen opened it before her dad got home from his morning walk. She had developed that habit quietly over the years, managing the household mail like it was naturally her responsibility. But this envelope was different. It was a receipt confirmation for a will restoration filing. Karen read it once, then again. She stood in the kitchen holding that piece of paper, and the careful, patient world she had been building for 3 years began to crack directly underneath her. By the time her dad walked through the front door, she was already waiting for him in the living room. Karen's composure lasted approximately 4 minutes. She started with confusion, asking what the document meant, saying there must have been a misunderstanding. Her dad listened without interrupting. Then she moved to justification, saying she had only been trying to protect the family's financial future, that Olivia had never been fully committed to the family anyway. Her dad still said very little, then her voice rose. She said things that had clearly been stored for a long time, sharp, revealing things that exposed exactly how she had viewed Olivia from the very beginning. Her dad's hand moved to his jacket pocket. Karen didn't notice. She kept talking. His phone was already recording. Every single word landed clearly and permanently into the microphone. He called Olivia that night at 9 p.m. She was already in bed, half reading, phone on the nightstand. She picked up on the first ring. His voice was different from any version she had heard in years. No careful pauses, no measured distance, just clear and direct and fully present. He told her about the recording. He told her what Karen had said. He told her the will had been restored and that Robert had already filed everything properly. And then he went quiet for a moment before saying, I let someone make you feel like you didn't belong in your own family, and I am going to spend a long time making that right. Olivia pressed her hand flat against her chest. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Karen moved out on a Friday. She didn't leave dramatically, no screaming, no door slamming, no final cutting words. She packed efficiently over 2 days while her dad stayed at his brother's house nearby. By Friday morning, her car was loaded and the house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. Her dad came home that afternoon and stood in the front hallway for a moment, just standing there, taking in the stillness. He called Dana first, then Jake, then Olivia. He didn't explain everything on those calls. He just said he was okay and that he would talk to each of them properly soon. When he called Olivia, she could hear something in his voice she hadn't heard in a very long time. He sounded like himself again. 2 weeks later, Olivia drove to her dad's house on a Sunday morning. No occasion, no agenda. She brought a coffee cake from the bakery near her apartment, the kind he had always loved, and let herself in with the key he had mailed her the week before, his key to his house. Something Karen had quietly ensured she never had. He was already in the kitchen when she walked in, 2 mugs on the counter, sunlight coming through the window above the sink. They sat at that kitchen table for 2 hours. They talked about everything and nothing. Old memories, small plans. The garden he wanted to fix up in spring. At one point, he reached across the table and put his hand over hers and said, You never stopped showing up. I won't forget that. And that was enough. That was everything.